The old farmer thought he was destined to spend his final years alone until he found a tiny orphaned kitten clinging to its mother. What happened next melted everyone's hearts. The low golden light of a late October sun slanted across the harvested fields, painting the stubble in hues of amber and rose. Robert Evans, 72 years young as he liked to wryly tell himself, walked the familiar path back towards his farmhouse. The satisfying ache of a long day's work settled deep in his bones. He carried the scent of turned earth, dry leaves, and the crisp, clean air that held the first real promise of winter's approach in the vast open country of the rural Midwest. His farm wasn't the sprawling operation it had been in his younger days, or when his wife Martha had been alive to manage the whirlwind of canning, gardening, and bookkeeping that seemed to orbit her tireless energy. Martha had been gone nearly 10 years now, claimed by a swift and unexpected illness that had left a silence in the sturdy farmhouse Robert still hadn't quite grown accustomed to. Their daughter, Sarah, lived 3 states away, busy with her own family and career, her calls and occasional visits bright but fleeting punctuation marks in his otherwise quiet existence. He'd sold off some parcels over the years, rented out the large cornfield to a younger neighbor, keeping only the house, the barn, the vegetable patch, smaller now but still meticulously tended, and the back 40, a stretch of rolling meadow and fallow field that bordered a small creek and a stand of old oak trees. It was enough to keep him busy, to feel the rhythm of the seasons in his hands and his heart, to maintain the connection to the land that had sustained his family for generations. Life was solitary, yes, but Robert didn't necessarily equate solitude with loneliness. He found companionship in the familiar landscape, the changing sky, the call of the red-winged blackbirds in the spring, the rustle of unseen creatures in the hedgerows. He had his routines: early rising, coffee brewed strong, checking the weather, planning the day's chores, mending fences, tending the late-season greens, tinkering with the old tractor that always seemed to need coaxing. And always, at the end of the day, this walk back across the fields as dusk began to settle, a time for quiet reflection, a way to measure the day's work against the backdrop of the enduring land. The air grew cooler as the sun dipped lower, a gentle breeze whispering through the dry stalks left standing in the fields, carrying the earthy scent of harvest completed. Robert paused, leaning on the sturdy walking stick he now used more often than not, his gaze sweeping across the familiar panorama. The vastness of the sky, the wide open space, the deep quiet. It usually brought him a sense of peace, of perspective. He'd been checking fence lines down by the creek, ensuring everything was secure before the first heavy snows arrived. It was honest work, tiring work, but necessary. His steps were slower now than they once were, his breath sometimes catching on the uphill stretches, but there was a deep satisfaction in knowing he could still manage, still keep his corner of the world in reasonable order through his own efforts. He turned towards the final stretch, a path cutting across the fallow section of the back 40, thick with tall, dry grasses and autumn weeds gone to seed. The farmhouse lights twinkled invitingly in the distance, promising warmth, supper, and the comfort of his worn armchair by the wood stove. He quickened his pace slightly, anticipating the simple pleasures of the evening. It was the unnatural stillness of a particular patch of grass, just off the path, that made him stop. Amidst the gentle sway and rustle of the surrounding vegetation, this one area seemed oddly inert, and there was a smudge of color that didn't belong, a patch of warm orange against the dun and gold of the dying grasses, catching the last rays of the setting sun. Robert frowned, squinting. A discarded piece of cloth? A strange fungus? His eyesight wasn't what it once was, especially in the fading light. Curiosity, mixed with the farmer's innate attention to anything out of place on his land, drew him off the path. He pushed through the tall, dry stalks, the seed heads brushing against his worn denim overalls. As he drew closer, the orange shape resolved itself. His breath caught in his throat. It was a cat. An orange tabby cat, lying stretched out on its side, nestled deep in the grass as if sleeping. But there was an unnatural rigidity to its posture, a lack of response to his approach that sent a chill down Robert's spine despite the warmth of his jacket. He'd seen enough of life and death on the farm to recognize the stillness that wasn't sleep. Robert approached the still form cautiously, his boots crunching softly on the dry earth beneath the grass. The orange cat lay utterly motionless, its fur slightly ruffled by the breeze, catching the last golden light. It was a medium-sized cat, clearly mature, with faint tabby stripes overlaying its warm ginger coat. Its eyes were closed, its body unnaturally limp against the ground. Robert had seen this stillness before, in lambs born too weak, in rabbits caught by foxes, in old barn cats that simply lay down one day and didn't get up again. He knew, even before he reached out, what he would find. He knelt beside the cat, his old knees protesting slightly. He gently placed a calloused hand on its side, feeling for the rise and fall of breath, for the faintest tremor of life. There was nothing, only a profound, irreversible coldness that was already beginning to set in, leaching the last vestiges of warmth from the small body. She was gone. Likely died sometime earlier that day, perhaps from illness, perhaps injury, perhaps simply the cumulative hardship of a stray life meeting the changing season. There were no obvious wounds he could see, just a heartbreaking stillness. A wave of sadness washed over Robert. He hadn't known this cat, but any loss of life felt keenly here, on the land where he had witnessed so much of its cycles. He sighed, a plume of white breath in the cooling air. He should move her, he thought, give her some dignity, bury her somewhere proper near the oak trees. It was then that he heard it, a tiny, almost inaudible sound, a faint mewling cry, seeming to come from right beside the motionless mother cat. Robert froze, startled. He peered closer, pushing aside the thick clumps of dry grass near the mother cat's belly. And there, nestled against the cold, unresponsive fur, was a kitten. It was incredibly small, impossibly so, its own orange fur still fluffy and soft, indicating its youth, perhaps only 5 or 6 weeks old. It looked painfully thin, its small ribs visible beneath its coat. Its eyes, disproportionately large in its tiny face, were wide with confusion and distress. It was actively nudging its mother's belly, then lifting its head to lick frantically at her fur near her face, letting out those small, heartbroken mews, as if desperately trying to wake her, to elicit some familiar response, some comforting warmth that was no longer there. Robert's heart clenched. He watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the kitten continued its futile efforts. It would lick, mew, nudge, then rub its tiny head against its mother's cold cheek, shivering not just from the evening chill, but, it seemed to Robert, from a primal fear and bewilderment. I didn't understand. It only knew that its source of warmth, food, and safety was suddenly, terrifyingly still and unresponsive. He could see now that the kitten's own fur was slightly damp near its face, not from tears, he knew rationally, but likely from the moisture of its own frantic licking against the cooling fur of its mother. But the image conveyed such profound, innocent grief that the distinction hardly mattered. This tiny creature was alone, orphaned in the middle of a vast, empty field as night approached, clinging desperately to the only security it had ever known, unaware that security was already gone. Robert felt a deep ache spread through his chest, an echo of his own past griefs, of Martha's absence, of the quiet loneliness that sometimes settled over him like the evening mist. He understood loss, and seeing it embodied in this tiny, helpless creature trying so desperately to deny the undeniable was almost more than he could bear. He couldn't just leave it here. The night would bring deeper cold. Predators, owls, foxes, coyotes roamed these fields. The kitten wouldn't survive on its own, not for more than a few hours, especially without its mother's milk and warmth. Its frantic attempts to nurse from the cold body were heartbreakingly futile. He knew what he had to do, but the thought of separating the kitten from its mother, even a deceased one, felt cruel. It was clinging so tightly, its tiny claws kneading instinctively against the unyielding fur. This was its whole world, its only known comfort, vanishing before its uncomprehending eyes. Robert knelt there for a long moment. The farmer, the old man, the solitary widower, watching the small drama of loss unfold in the twilight. The setting sun painted the sky in streaks of purple and fading gold, casting long shadows across the field. The wind whispered through the dry grass, a mournful sound. He had come seeking the peace of day's end, but instead he had found this raw, painful intersection of life and death, leaving him with a choice and a responsibility he hadn't sought but couldn't possibly ignore. The kitten's soft, distressed mewling continued, a tiny counterpoint to the vast quiet of the approaching night. Robert knew he couldn't delay. The air was growing colder by the minute, the last warmth draining from the sky. He had to separate the kitten, had to give the mother cat some semblance of a respectful farewell, and get the orphan to safety. He reached out slowly, gently, towards the kitten. "All right, little fella," he murmured, his voice low and soothing, pitched just above the rustle of the wind. "It's okay. Come on now." The kitten startled violently at his approaching hand, arching its tiny back and letting out a miniature hiss that was more pathetic than threatening. It tried to burrow deeper against its mother's body, its small claws hooking into her fur. It clearly associated Robert, the large, unfamiliar presence, with danger, clinging desperately to the only familiar scent and shape it knew, even in death. "Easy now," Robert crooned, keeping his movement slow. "I'm not gonna hurt you. Just gotta get you warm, little one." He carefully, gently, worked his fingers under the kitten's small body, trying to pry its grip loose from its mother's fur without hurting it. The kitten struggled weakly, mewing in protest, a heartbreaking sound that tugged at Robert's soul. He finally managed to scoop it up, holding its trembling, feather-light body cupped in one large, weathered hand. It felt impossibly fragile. The kitten immediately tried to wriggle free, crying out, its eyes wide with terror, searching frantically for the comforting bulk of its mother. Robert held it securely but gently against his chest, tucking it partially inside his open jacket, hoping his own body heat and the soft flannel of his shirt would offer some small measure of comfort and security. "Shh, shh, little fella. It's all right. You're safe now," he whispered, though the kitten continued to squirm and cry. His attention turned back to the mother cat, lying still and cold in the flattened grass. He couldn't just leave her here, exposed. It felt profoundly disrespectful. Looking around, he spotted a mature oak tree standing sentinel at the edge of the fallow field near the creek bed. Its roots spread wide, offering a sheltered spot beneath its canopy. That would be a fitting place. Holding the squirming kitten securely against his chest with one arm, Robert gently lifted the mother cat's body with the other. She was already stiffening, her slight weight heavier than he expected. He carried her slowly, carefully, towards the oak tree, the kitten continuing its distressed mewling inside his jacket. Beneath the oak, the ground was softer, covered in a thick layer of fallen leaves. Robert laid the mother cat down gently at the base of the trunk. He looked around for something to use as a tool. Finding a sturdy, flat piece of fallen bark, he knelt again and began scraping away the leaves and loose topsoil, creating a shallow depression in the earth. It wasn't easy with one hand effectively occupied by the kitten, and the ground was growing harder with the encroaching cold, but he worked patiently, methodically. He didn't dig a deep grave, he didn't have a shovel, and time was critical for the kitten, but he made a space large enough to receive the mother cat's body respectfully. He carefully placed her within it, arranging her limbs gently, as if tucking her in for her final sleep. He paused for a moment, his head bowed, offering a silent prayer, or perhaps just a simple acknowledgement of the life that had passed, its struggles now over. Then, using his hands and the piece of bark, he slowly pushed the loose soil and thick layer of leaves back over the body, creating a low mound. He found a few loose field stones nearby and placed them carefully on top, marking the spot and offering a small measure of protection against scavengers. It wasn't much, but it was the best he could do under the circumstances, a quiet, natural burial beneath the ancient oak. Throughout the process, the kitten in his jacket had continued to cry, though perhaps a little less frantically now, subdued by the warmth and the steady rhythm of Robert's heartbeat against its small body. When the covering was complete, Robert instinctively held the kitten slightly out, letting it see the low mound beneath the tree. The kitten seemed to quiet for a moment, its large eyes fixed on the spot. Did it understand? Robert didn't know. Perhaps it simply registered the finality, the absence. After a moment, it let out one last soft mew, then turned and tried to burrow back into the warmth of Robert's jacket, seeking comfort in the living presence that remained. Robert held it close, stroking its tiny back with a calloused finger. "Okay, little fella," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Time to go home. Time to get you warm and fed." He stood up slowly, his knees stiff, his heart heavy, but also filled with a new, fragile sense of purpose. He turned his back on the darkening field and the quiet grave beneath the oak, and started the walk towards the welcoming lights of his farmhouse, carrying the tiny, orphaned life that was now, unexpectedly, his responsibility. The weight felt immense, far heavier than the small bundle nestled inside his coat. The familiar warmth of the farmhouse kitchen enveloped Robert as he stepped inside, carefully shutting the door against the growing night chill. The contrast between the cold, darkening field and the steady comfort of his home was stark, underscored by the tiny, trembling creature he held against his chest. He gently drew the kitten out from inside his jacket. It blinked rapidly in the brighter light, its small body still shivering, though less intensely now. Its fur was sparse, its frame bird-like. Robert guessed it couldn't be more than 5 weeks old, maybe 6 at the most, barely weaned if at all, utterly dependent, and now utterly alone, save for him. His first priority was sustained warmth and a safe space. He remembered the sturdy cardboard box he'd used for bringing in vegetables from the garden. He fetched it from the pantry, lined it thickly with old, clean towels, and placed it on the floor near the cast-iron wood stove, which still radiated a gentle heat from the day's use. He made sure it wasn't too close, just near enough to benefit from the ambient warmth. He carefully settled the kitten into the makeshift nest. It immediately tried to burrow under the towels, seeking darkness and security, letting out small, frightened peeps. Robert watched it for a moment, his heart aching with pity. Next came the question of food. At this age, was it eating solid food yet, or did it still need milk? He didn't have kitten formula on hand. He rummaged through the refrigerator. Cow's milk wasn't ideal, he knew that much, could cause digestive upset. He found a small carton of cream he used for his coffee, maybe diluted heavily with warm water. It was better than nothing for now. He warmed a little water, mixed in a splash of cream, ensuring the mixture was barely lukewarm. Now, how to offer it? He didn't have a pet nursing bottle. He thought for a moment, then found a clean eyedropper in the medicine cabinet. He filled it with the diluted cream mixture. Kneeling beside the box, he spoke softly. "All right, little Pip," he murmured, the name popping into his head, small, simple, like the creature itself. "Let's see if you'll take a little something. Gotta get some strength in you." He gently coaxed the kitten, Pip, out from under the towels. Pip resisted weakly, crying, clearly terrified. Robert held him steady with one hand and carefully squeezed a single drop from the eyedropper onto the kitten's lips. Pip automatically licked it off. Robert squeezed another drop, then another. Slowly, painstakingly, he managed to get a small amount of the warm liquid into the tiny cat. Pip didn't drink eagerly, seemed more confused than hungry, but he swallowed. It was a start. Cleaning the kitten was another challenge. Its fur was dirty, slightly matted in places. Robert knew a bath was out of the question. The chill would be dangerous. He took a soft, damp cloth, warmed with water, and gently wiped Pip's fur, cleaning away the worst of the dirt, being especially careful around the kitten's face and tiny bottom. Pip squirmed and protested, but Robert persevered with quiet patience, murmuring reassurances. Once cleaned as best as possible and having taken a few droppers full of the milk mixture, Pip seemed utterly exhausted. Robert tucked him back into the towel-lined box near the stove. The kitten curled up instantly, pressing itself into the soft fabric, and its cries subsided into silence. Whether from sleep or sheer depletion, Robert couldn't tell. He stood up stiffly, looking down at the small creature. Caring for a kitten this young, especially one traumatized by loss and exposure, was going to be demanding. It meant frequent feedings, constant warmth, meticulous cleaning. It meant interrupted sleep, worry, and a level of responsibility he hadn't anticipated an hour ago. He went about making his own simple supper, the usual quiet routine feeling different now with the addition of the small, vulnerable presence in the kitchen. He ate his stew absently, his thoughts on the task ahead. He'd need to get proper kitten milk replacer from the feed store in town tomorrow. Maybe a real nursing bottle. He'd have to figure out how to keep Pip warm through the night. Later, settled in his armchair with a book he couldn't focus on, Robert listened to the quiet sounds from the box near the stove, an occasional soft peep, a rustle of towels. He felt a weight of responsibility settle upon him, heavy but not entirely unwelcome. His life, so long defined by predictable solitude, had suddenly, unexpectedly, acquired a new focus, a tiny heartbeat depending entirely on his care. He sighed, looking towards the warm glow of the stove where the orphan slept. It was going to be a long night, and likely many long days to follow, navigating this unfamiliar territory of nurture and need. The first few days were a blur of exhaustion and worry for Robert. Pip, as he now firmly thought of the kitten, required feeding every 3 to 4 hours, day and night. Robert quickly procured a proper kitten milk replacer, KMR, and a nursing bottle from the feed store in Harmony Creek, enduring the store owner's friendly but curious questions with his usual reserved nods and murmurs. Learning to bottle feed the tiny creature was a clumsy process at first, getting the angle right, coaxing Pip to latch onto the nipple, dealing with dribbles and refusal. Pip often cried pitifully during these early feedings, perhaps missing the familiar comfort of his mother. But hunger usually won out, and he gradually began to take the formula more readily. Warmth remained crucial. Robert kept the wood stove burning low consistently, ensuring the kitchen, where Pip's box remained, stayed cozy. He refilled the hot water bottle wrapped in towels several times a day, tucking it near the sleeping kitten. He learned to stimulate Pip gently with a warm, damp cloth after feedings to help him eliminate, mimicking what the mother cat would have done. An intimate task that felt both awkward and profoundly necessary. Pip spent most of those early days sleeping, curled into a tight ball, conserving energy. When awake, he was often fearful, flattening himself in the box or letting out distressed mews if Robert approached too quickly. Robert learned to move slowly, speak softly, telegraphing his intentions, letting Pip adjust at his own pace. Slowly, tentatively, signs of progress emerged. Pip began to gain a little weight, his tiny body feeling slightly less fragile in Robert's hands. His orange fur started to lose its dullness, becoming softer as Robert continued his gentle cleaning routines. He began to respond more actively during feeding time, latching onto the bottle with growing strength, his tiny paws sometimes kneading the air or Robert's hand instinctively. After about a week, Pip started exploring the confines of his box with greater curiosity, batting awkwardly at the folds of the towels. Robert introduced a small, soft ball of yarn. Pip eyed it suspiciously at first, then gave it a tentative pat, followed by a clumsy pounce. It was the first real sign of kittenish playfulness Robert had seen, and it brought a rare smile to his face. As Pip grew stronger, Robert started letting him out of the box for short periods, always under close supervision. The kitchen floor was a vast, intimidating landscape for the tiny kitten. He'd take a few hesitant steps, low to the ground, tail tucked, then dart back to the safety of his box at the slightest creak of the floorboards or rumble from the refrigerator. Robert would just sit quietly on the floor nearby, letting Pip explore at his own pace, offering quiet words of encouragement. The turning point in their relationship came one quiet afternoon. Robert was sitting on the floor, leaning against the kitchen cabinets, watching Pip cautiously investigate the leg of the kitchen table. Robert held out a hand slowly, palm down, letting it rest unmoving on the floor. Pip watched the hand for a long moment, then, instead of retreating, took a few tentative steps forward. He sniffed Robert's fingers carefully, then, to Robert's surprise, gave one finger a brief, raspy lick with his tiny pink tongue before quickly backing away again. It was a small gesture, fleeting, but it felt enormous. A spark of trust ignited. From then on, the progress accelerated. Pip grew bolder in his explorations, venturing further into the living room, batting at imaginary foes, climbing awkwardly onto the braided rug. He started responding to Robert's voice, sometimes even approaching when called softly. He discovered the joy of chasing a dangling string Robert offered, his tiny body contorting in comical leaps and pounces. He began, tentatively at first, to seek comfort from Robert beyond feeding time. He'd sometimes climb hesitantly onto Robert's lap when he sat reading in his armchair, kneading the fabric of his overalls before settling into a purring, sleeping ball. Robert would sit perfectly still during these times, hardly daring to breathe, cherishing the warmth and the trusting weight of the small creature against him. The bond, forged through necessity and nurtured with patience, solidified. Pip learned that Robert's large, weathered hands meant warmth, food, and gentle scratches behind the ears. Robert learned the specific pitch of Pip's meow that meant hunger versus the one that meant, "Pay attention to me." He learned that Pip loved chasing sunbeams on the floor and hated the sound of the vacuum cleaner. The farmhouse, long steeped in silence and solitary routine, now echoed with the soft padding of kitten paws, the occasional playful skitter, the contented rumble of a tiny purr. Robert found himself talking to Pip constantly, explaining the workings of the farm, recounting stories of Martha, sharing his thoughts on the weather. Pip, in turn, would watch him intently, occasionally rubbing against his leg or offering a soft chirp, a small but constant presence that filled the house and Robert's life with an unexpected warmth and vitality. The tentative steps had become strides, trust had taken root. Seasons turned on Robert Evans's farm, cycling through the vibrant green of summer, the golden hues of another autumn, the deep white silence of winter, and back again to the tentative rebirth of spring. Inside the farmhouse, the orphaned kitten had blossomed into a sleek, healthy young cat. Pip, as Robert steadfastly called him, was no longer the fragile, trembling creature rescued from the field, but a confident, affectionate companion, thoroughly integrated into the rhythms of the old farmer's life. His orange coat shone with health, his green eyes were bright and curious, and though he remained a cat of moderate size, he carried himself with a certain self-assured grace. He was playful in bursts, chasing wind-blown leaves across the yard or batting enthusiastically at the piece of twine Robert dangled for him, but mostly he was a creature of quiet companionship, content to nap in a patch of sun, supervise Robert's chores from a distance, or curl up near him in the evenings. He was undeniably Robert's cat, following him devotedly from room to room, rubbing against his legs with insistent purrs when he felt neglected, often sleeping soundly on the foot of Robert's bed at night. The deep fear he had shown initially had vanished entirely in Robert's presence, replaced by an absolute, unwavering trust. He remained slightly wary of strangers, retreating to observe from a safe distance if visitors came to the farm, but his bond with Robert was profound and unmistakable. Robert, too, had changed. The deep lines of solitude around his eyes seemed softer, often crinkled now by a quiet smile directed at Pip's antics. His movements still held the deliberation of age, but there was a lightness to his step that hadn't been there before. The silence of the house was now a comfortable quiet, punctuated by Pip's presence, by Robert's own habit of talking aloud to his feline companion. Caring for Pip, watching him grow, nurturing him from near death into vibrant life, had filled a hollow space in Robert's heart, giving his later years a focus and an affection he hadn't realized he craved. There was one recurring behavior of Pip's that always gave Robert pause, stirring a familiar mix of sadness and wonder. Often, in the late afternoon, especially on clear days, Pip would settle himself on the porch railing or on the windowsill in the living room that faced west, towards the back 40. He would sit there quite still, gazing intently out across the fields, towards the lone oak tree standing sentinel near the creek bed, the place where Robert had laid Pip's mother to rest. Pip would sit like that for long stretches, seemingly lost in contemplation, his gaze fixed on that distant spot. He wasn't watching for birds or field mice. His focus seemed different, more internal somehow. Robert never disturbed him during these times. He would simply observe the young cat, his heart aching slightly with the memory of that heartbreaking scene in the field. Did Pip remember? Did he sense something significant about that place? Or was it just a familiar vantage point, a spot that caught the last rays of the sun? Robert didn't know. He suspected it was likely the latter, that attributing conscious memory or grief to the cat was just his own human projection. But still, watching Pip gaze steadfastly towards the oak tree felt like witnessing a quiet act of remembrance. It connected the present, filled with warmth and companionship, back to the moment of loss and rescue that had brought them together. It was a reminder of the fragility of life, the sorrow of loss, but also the incredible resilience of the spirit, both animal and human. One particularly beautiful autumn evening, the sky ablaze with sunset colors mirroring the day Robert had found him, Pip sat in his usual spot on the porch railing, silhouetted against the fiery sky. Robert sat nearby in his old rocking chair, sipping coffee, watching him. "Thinking about her, are you, Pip?" Robert murmured softly. Pip's ear flickered slightly, but he didn't turn, his gaze remaining fixed on the distant field. Robert sighed, a sound not of sadness, but of quiet acceptance. He didn't need Pip to remember consciously. He remembered. He remembered the cold, the fear, the tiny spark of life he'd almost missed. He remembered the long nights, the patient care, the slow blossoming of trust. He remembered the stillness under the oak tree. This young cat, thriving and secure beside him now, was a living testament to that day, a symbol of hope found in sorrow, of connection forged in loss. Pip's quiet vigils, watching the field where his life began and nearly ended, served as a poignant reminder to Robert to cherish the present, to appreciate the unexpected gifts life sometimes offered, even late in the journey. The old farmer and the young cat sat together in the fading light, sharing the quiet peace of the evening, bound by an unspoken history. The watcher on the porch, gazing towards a memory only one of them truly held, was a constant, gentle reminder that even in the face of loss, life continued, love endured, and companionship could bloom in the most unlikely of fields.
The orange cat sleeps by a grave for years, until a girl puts a toy mouse on it. The Greenhaven Cemetery, nestled on a gentle slope overlooking the town of Oakhaven, Vermont, was a place of quiet beauty and enduring peace. Ancient oaks and maples cast dappled shadows across the rows of weathered headstones, each marking a life lived, a story ended. But one particular grave, smaller than the rest, held a mystery that had captivated the town for years. It was the grave of a child, marked by a simple headstone bearing the name Samuel Thompson and the dates 1998 to 2005. A small, faded teddy bear sat propped against the stone, its fur matted from years of exposure to the elements. And every day, without fail, an orange tabby cat lay curled upon the grave, as if keeping a silent vigil. The cat, a handsome creature with fur the color of a fiery sunset, was a familiar sight to anyone who visited Greenhaven. He appeared to be well-fed, not feral, but he kept his distance from people, his amber eyes watchful and wary. He would arrive in the early morning, settle himself upon Samuel's grave, and remain there for hours, sometimes all day, only leaving as the sun began to set. The townsfolk had various theories about the cat. Some believed he was a stray who had simply chosen the grave as a comfortable resting place. Others whispered that he was a reincarnation of a beloved pet, somehow drawn back to the child he had loved. But the truth, as it often does, was more profound, more heartbreaking, and more beautiful. Margaret Olson, 79 years young and a lifelong resident of Oakhaven, was one of the many who were intrigued by the cat. She visited Greenhaven regularly, tending to the graves of her late husband, Arthur, and her parents. She had often observed the orange cat, its unwavering devotion to the small grave, and felt a deep sense of empathy for the unknown child and the mysterious feline. "It's like he's guarding him," she'd often say to Arthur, during her one-sided conversations at his headstone. "Like he's making sure he's not alone." Margaret had a kind heart and a curious mind. She wasn't content with the rumors and speculation. She wanted to know the story behind Samuel Thompson and his loyal companion. She felt a pull, a sense of connection to this small, silent drama playing out in the quiet corner of the cemetery. It was a mystery she felt compelled to unravel, a story she needed to understand. And so, she began her quiet investigation, starting with the one person who might hold some answers: Mr. Abernathy, the cemetery caretaker. Mr. Abernathy, a man as weathered and enduring as the headstones he tended, had been the caretaker of Greenhaven Cemetery for over 40 years. He knew every grave, every family history, every secret whispered among the tombstones. Margaret found him one crisp autumn afternoon, raking leaves near the entrance. She approached him hesitantly, offering a warm smile and a freshly baked apple pie, a tactic that rarely failed to loosen tongues in Oakhaven. "Mr. Abernathy," she began, "I've been wondering about that little boy's grave, Samuel Thompson, and the orange cat that's always there." Mr. Abernathy sighed, his gaze drifting towards the far corner of the cemetery. "Ah, yes, Sammy. And Rusty. A sad story, that one. He leaned on his rake, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and remembrance. Sammy was a sweet boy, full of life, despite his condition. He had a heart problem, you see, a congenital defect. They knew from the start that his time would be limited. He paused, taking a deep breath. His parents, the Thompsons, they were good people, devoted to Sammy. They tried everything, every treatment, every surgery. But it wasn't enough. Margaret listened intently, her heart aching for the family she had never met. "The cat," she prompted gently. "Was it his?" Mr. Abernathy shook his head. "Not exactly. Rusty was a stray, used to hang around the Thompsons' house. Sammy loved him, though. He'd sneak him food, play with him in the yard. They had a special bond, those two." He explained that Sammy's condition had worsened rapidly in his final months. He had spent most of his time indoors, too weak to play outside. But Rusty had remained a constant presence, often sitting by Sammy's window, as if keeping watch. "After Sammy passed," Mr. Abernathy continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "Rusty just disappeared. We all thought he'd moved on, found another home. But then, a few weeks after the funeral, he showed up here at the cemetery. And he's been here ever since." Margaret felt tears welling up in her eyes. The cat's loyalty, his unwavering devotion to the conversation. Lily shared memories of Samuel, her voice filled with a mixture of love and sorrow. She described his infectious laughter, his boundless curiosity, his unwavering kindness, even in the face of his illness. She spoke of his love for animals, his fascination with nature, his dreams of becoming a veterinarian. "He always wanted a cat," Lily said, her gaze drifting towards Rusty, who was still curled up beside the toy mouse. "But Mom and Dad were worried about his allergies, about his condition. They said it wasn't practical." She explained that Rusty had been a stray, a neighborhood cat who had befriended Samuel. They had formed an unlikely bond, a connection that transcended words. Samuel would sneak food out to Rusty, play with him in the yard, and even talk to him, sharing his secrets and his dreams. "Rusty was always there for him," Lily said, her voice choked with emotion. Even when Sammy was too sick to go outside, Rusty would sit by his window, keeping him company. Margaret listened intently, her heart aching for the young girl and the loss she had endured. She also felt a growing sense of admiration for Lily's strength and resilience, for her willingness to share her memories of Samuel with a stranger. As they talked, Margaret realized that Lily's visit to the cemetery was not a regular occurrence. She lived in another town with her mother, and they didn't often get the chance to come to Oakhaven. "Mom, she has a hard time with it," Lily explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "She can't bear to come here. It's too painful." Margaret understood. Grief could be a heavy burden, a weight that could crush the spirit. She had experienced it herself after Arthur's death. She felt a surge of compassion for Lily and her mother, and a renewed determination to help them, to offer them whatever support she could. She realized that her initial curiosity about the cat and the grave had led her to something far more profound. A connection to a grieving family, an opportunity to offer comfort and companionship. She invited Lily to her home for tea and cookies, an offer that Lily accepted hesitantly, but with a glimmer of gratitude in her eyes. The threads of connection were being woven, slowly but surely, between the elderly woman and the young girl, brought together by the shared memory of a boy and the unwavering loyalty of an orange cat. Margaret's cozy bungalow, filled with the comforting scent of baking and the gentle ticking of a grandfather clock, felt like a haven to Lily. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, impersonal environment of her mother's apartment, where the silence of grief was both heartbreaking and profoundly moving. She thanked Mr. Abernathy for his time and his story, leaving him with the apple pie and a promise to visit again. Driven by a growing sense of purpose, Margaret decided to delve deeper into Samuel's life. She visited the Oakhaven Historical Society, poring over old newspapers and town records. She learned that the Thompsons had been active members of the community, involved in local charities and school events. Sammy had been a bright, cheerful boy, beloved by his teachers and classmates. He had loved animals, especially cats, and had dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. She found a few faded photographs of Sammy, his smiling face radiating a joy that belied his fragile health. In one picture, he was holding a small orange kitten, its fur a vibrant contrast to his pale skin. It was Rusty, no doubt. The more Margaret learned about Samuel, the more she understood the cat's unwavering vigil. It wasn't just a random act of feline affection. It was a testament to a deep and enduring bond, a love that transcended even death. And Margaret, with her own experiences of loss and grief, felt a profound connection to both the boy and the cat, a connection that fueled her determination to uncover the remaining pieces of the puzzle. The mystery of the mourning cat was slowly transforming into a story of love, loss, and the enduring power of connection. The following Saturday, Margaret visited Greenhaven Cemetery, as she did every week. She brought fresh flowers for Arthur's grave and a small bag of cat treats for Rusty. As she approached Samuel's grave, she saw that she wasn't alone. A young girl, perhaps 11 or 12 years old, was kneeling by the headstone, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Margaret hesitated, not wanting to intrude on the girl's grief. But then she saw Rusty. The cat was sitting a short distance away, watching the girl with an intensity that was both unnerving and strangely comforting. The girl reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, worn stuffed animal, a gray mouse with faded pink ears and a missing button eye. It was clearly an old, well-loved toy. With trembling hands, she placed the mouse on top of Samuel's grave, directly in front of the headstone. The effect on Rusty was immediate and dramatic. He let out a soft, almost mournful meow, and then slowly approached the grave. He sniffed the toy mouse cautiously, then began to rub his head against it, purring loudly. He nudged it with his nose, then curled up beside it, his body pressed against the small, stuffed animal. It was a scene that brought tears to Margaret's eyes. The cat's reaction was undeniable proof of the connection of the shared history between the boy, the cat, and the toy mouse. The girl, startled by the cat's sudden appearance, looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but there was a flicker of surprise, and perhaps even a hint of comfort, in her expression. Margaret approached slowly, offering a gentle smile. "He seems to like your mouse," she said softly. The girl nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "It was Sammy's," she whispered. "His favorite." Margaret's heart skipped a beat. "Sammy?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The girl looked at her, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and curiosity. "My brother," she said. "This is his grave." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The girl was Samuel's sister, the keeper of his memory, the silent witness to his short life and enduring love. And the toy mouse, a simple, worn-out object, was the key that had unlocked the mystery of the mourning cat, revealing the depth of the bond between a boy and his feline friend. The encounter, seemingly orchestrated by fate, was the pivotal moment that would connect Margaret to the girl and her family, allowing the full story of Samuel Thompson to finally be told. Margaret introduced herself, her voice filled with warmth and compassion. The girl's name was Lily. She was, as Margaret had suspected, Samuel's older sister, though only by 2 years. She had been 10 years old when Samuel died, old enough to remember him vividly, to feel the profound loss of her only sibling. Margaret sat down on a nearby bench, inviting Lily to join her. They talked for a long time, the quiet hush of the cemetery providing a comforting backdrop to their coif hung heavy in the air. Over tea and cookies, oatmeal raisin, Margaret's specialty, Lily began to open up, sharing more stories about Samuel, about their childhood together, about the dreams they had shared. She showed Margaret photographs of Samuel, his smiling face radiating a joy that belied his illness. She even brought out a small, worn scrapbook, filled with drawings and stories that Samuel had created. Margaret, in turn, shared stories of her own life, of her marriage to Arthur, of their quiet life in Oakhaven. She spoke of her own experiences with loss, of the pain of grief, but also of the healing power of time and the enduring strength of love. As they talked, a bond formed between them, a connection that transcended their age difference. They found solace in each other's company, a shared understanding of the pain of loss and the enduring power of memory. Rusty, who had initially been wary of Lily, eventually warmed up to her, allowing her to stroke his fur and even curling up on her lap, purring contentedly. It was as if he sensed the connection between them, the shared love for Samuel that bound them together. Margaret learned that Lily's mother, Sarah, had struggled deeply with Samuel's death. She had withdrawn into herself, isolating herself from friends and family, unable to cope with the overwhelming grief. Lily, in turn, had taken on a burden of responsibility far beyond her years, trying to care for her mother while also dealing with her own sorrow. Margaret decided to reach out to Sarah. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she felt compelled to try, to offer her support and understanding. She wrote Sarah a heartfelt letter, sharing her own experiences with loss and expressing her admiration for Samuel's spirit and Rusty's unwavering loyalty. She invited Sarah to visit her, to talk, to share her memories of Samuel. It took several weeks, but Sarah eventually responded. She called Margaret, her voice hesitant and filled with a mixture of sadness and curiosity. They arranged to meet at Margaret's home. The meeting was tentative at first, filled with awkward silences and hesitant smiles. But as they began to talk, as they shared stories of Samuel, a connection began to form. Sarah, for the first time in years, felt a glimmer of hope, a sense of release from the suffocating grip of her grief. Margaret, Lily, and Sarah began to meet regularly, forming a small, unlikely support group. They would visit Samuel's grave together, sharing memories, tending to the flowers, and watching Rusty, who always seemed to know when they were coming. They found comfort in each other's company, a shared understanding that transcended words. They were healing together, slowly but surely, finding strength in their shared grief and their enduring love for Samuel. The orange cat, the silent witness to their pain, became a symbol of hope, a reminder of the enduring power of love and the unexpected connections that can bloom even in the face of loss. Years passed. The seasons changed, the leaves turned, the snow fell, and the flowers bloomed again. The small, quiet corner of Greenhaven Cemetery remained a place of peace and remembrance, a testament to the enduring power of love. Lily grew into a young woman, strong, resilient, and compassionate. She never forgot her brother, Samuel, and she carried his memory with her, always. She pursued her own dreams, becoming a teacher, inspired by Samuel's love of learning and his unwavering kindness. Sarah, with Margaret's support and Lily's unwavering love, slowly emerged from the darkness of her grief. She found solace in the community, in the friendships she had formed, and in the enduring memory of her son. She even started volunteering at the local animal shelter, finding comfort in caring for other creatures who needed love and companionship, a quiet tribute to Samuel's dream of becoming a veterinarian. Margaret, though her steps grew slower and her hair grayer, remained a steadfast presence in their lives, a source of wisdom, comfort, and unwavering support. She had found a new purpose in her later years, a renewed sense of connection to the world around her. Her quiet life had been transformed by the mystery of the mourning cat, a mystery that had led her to a grieving family and a profound understanding of the enduring power of love. Rusty, the orange cat, remained a fixture at Greenhaven Cemetery, his vigil unwavering. He was older now, his fur a little less vibrant, his movements a little slower, but his loyalty remained unchanged. He continued to visit Samuel's grave every day, curling up beside the toy mouse, a silent guardian of a cherished memory. He had become a local legend, a symbol of enduring love and devotion, a testament to the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. The town of Oakhaven, too, had been touched by Samuel's story. The small grave in Greenhaven Cemetery became a place of pilgrimage, not just for family and friends, but for anyone who had been moved by the tale of the boy and his loyal cat. People would leave flowers, small toys, and handwritten notes, expressing their sympathy, their admiration, and their shared understanding of the pain of loss and the enduring power of love. The Oakhaven Historical Society, inspired by Margaret's research and Lily's memories, created a small exhibit dedicated to Samuel Thompson and Rusty. It featured photographs, drawings, and excerpts from Sarah Miller's journal, from the previous, different story. This was an error, so it is now Samuel's journal entries and his mother's remembrances, telling the story of their lives and their enduring bond. It was a reminder that even the shortest of lives can leave a lasting impact, that even the smallest of creatures can teach us profound lessons about love, loyalty, and compassion. One sunny afternoon, years after their first meeting, Margaret and Lily sat together on the bench near Samuel's grave, watching Rusty as he napped peacefully in the warm sunshine. They had become like family, bound together by shared grief, shared healing, and the enduring memory of a boy who had touched their lives in profound ways. "He was a special boy, wasn't he?" Margaret said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of sadness and affection. Lily nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He was," she said. "He taught me so much, about love, about life, about everything." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the gentle rustling of the leaves, the distant chirping of birds, the comforting purr of the orange cat. Margaret reached out and took Lily's hand, her touch gentle and reassuring. "His memory will live on, Lily," she said, "in our hearts, in this place, in the stories we tell." And it was true. Samuel Thompson's short life had left an indelible mark on the world, a legacy of love, kindness, and compassion. His story, interwoven with the unwavering loyalty of an orange cat, had touched the hearts of everyone in Oakhaven, reminding them of the importance of connection, the power of remembrance, and the enduring beauty of the human spirit. The tapestry of memories, woven from threads of grief, love, and healing, would continue to inspire and comfort for generations to come, a testament to the enduring power of love that transcends even death. The simple act of a girl placing a toy mouse on a grave had unlocked a story of profound love and loss, a story that would forever be etched in the heart of a small American town. Okay, let's summarize the story and then provide detailed character descriptions.